Welcome back to part 3 for the module on the development of auditory function. This time, we'll be talking about the integration of auditory skills with speech, language, cognition, literacy, music, and play. You see here a link to the white paper that's on Hearing First called Connect the Dots. If you haven't had a chance to read this, I encourage you to look at it because it really takes the key pieces that make for a successful listening and spoken language journey and highlights them, including research that supports what we do to help these families and their children succeed. Principles 7, 8, and 9 of auditory verbal practice are to guide and coach parents to use natural developmental patterns of audition, speech, language, cognition, and communication. So we're looking for the child with the hearing loss to follow the same steps that a child with typical hearing would, and in the same order. Principle 8 is to guide and coach parents to help their child self-monitor spoken language through listening. And it's through this learning to self-monitor that children are able to achieve a natural sounding voice that does not reflect their hearing loss. Principle number 9 is the use of diagnostic assessments to develop individualized objectives to monitor progress and to evaluate the effectiveness of teaching activities. So at the biggest sense, this is to determine if you're being effective, if the child is making progress. All young children should move forward. And if you're not seeing progress, or if you're not seeing a good rate of progress, it's important to stop and look at all the pieces and determine why. This is when it's important to go back and consider all the principles of auditory verbal practice and to see if this situation is falling outside of those guidelines in some way, or if there might be an additional issue that is coming to the surface that might be a comorbid diagnosis or something else going on. In the day-to-day, smaller sense, this is to look at your objectives and to determine how the child is doing and adjust quickly to meet their needs. So that if, for instance, you were working on understanding directions with 2 critical elements, like get the big bear, and you all of a sudden found that the child didn't seem to be understanding the word big, that you then work on this vocabulary so that the child can be successful with the auditory memory goal. We talk a lot about hearing age or listening age when we're looking at the progress of a child on their listening and spoken language journey. The hearing age or listening age is the length of time the child has had optimal access to sound with the use of hearing technology, whether it be hearing aids, cochlear implants, bone conduction devices, whatever it is. And this is different than chronological age. We typically have a gap between the level of performance that is at the listening age and what's expected for the chronological age. As we move through our intervention, we hope to move the child's level of performance up to their chronological age so that we have then effectively closed a gap. When we're looking at children that are receiving optimal access to sound a little bit later, not the babies, but children maybe around 2, and certainly children who are older than that, the Auditory Learning Guide is one tool that's available that offers us a good way to look at progress and to find goals and work in a systematic fashion. This chart was developed by Beth Walker and is a compilation of several other different tools, but laid out on a nice chart, which is easy to use. You work on all the columns of the chart simultaneously. So you don't just work on column 1 and then move to column 2, but you're working across the first step in all of the columns and progressing through in a fashion that moves sort of like a diagonal down the chart. So children will achieve the complete column 1 often before they've really hit a lot of the goals in the word level column. Um, as children and as children progress through this, it may be helpful to look at the different colors as indicators of expectations for what type of progress could be made in the first year, the second year, the third year, the fourth year. The younger the child, the less relevant this is because they will probably move to meet their developmental level and not need you to go through all the discrete steps. However, at least in our clinic, we still see a lot of children who, for whatever reason, whether it's their a child adopted from a foreign country or an immigrant family or some other reason, that are still not implanted or not receiving good access to sound in a timely manner so that they begin their journey at 3 years of age or 4 years of age. And in that case, this becomes a really important roadmap. Looking at the first column, sound awareness, we want the children who we're working with to monitor their environment through listening. And it begins with the sound awareness at the very basic level of recognizing whether sound is present or absent. And you can see as you work down the column, you're looking to see if the child is able to detect sounds at different distances, to detect whispered speech, and then moving to the Ling-6 sound test, and ultimately, if the child has bilateral hearing, are they able to localize a sound? One of the things that therapists or speech language pathologists can really help audiologists with is by teaching a conditioned response to a young child. If a child is able to make a conditioned response, you're going to see better results on hearing tests that are more accurate, and you're going to see better programming, and you're going to get it faster. Typically, you can begin working on a conditioned response around 18 months of age, sometimes even a little younger. It's important to recognize that the Ling test is a tool that confirms access to sound across the speech frequencies. With a toddler, it's a quick activity to reinforce a conditioned response so that you can get these faster and more accurate results. And also always remember that it's not a whole therapy session. It's really a tool, and it's not meant to be the focus of an entire session. Here we're going to watch a video of the mother administering the Ling test for each year individually, and the child is imitating the sounds, which if we go back and consider Erber's model, means he's identifying what the sounds are, not just knowing that they're there, but knowing what they are. So let's watch. Ready to listen? Okay. I'm going to take one off and Mommy's going to say the sounds for you, okay? E. Ooh. Yay. All right, let's swap ears. That was very good. R. E. Ooh. And you'll notice that this mom has paid attention and she's not giving visual cues and she's not falling into a pattern because that really gives the whole thing away. If you're presenting a sound every 2 seconds, then the child's able to guess at when a sound is going to be presented. And if they don't typically hear one, they're going to substitute that in when there's a pause. So in order to get an accurate result, you want to avoid getting into a pattern as you administer the sounds. So this is what this test should look like. when a child has um, reached the age of 4, going into school, so that it can be a quick tool to look at whether or not the equipment is functioning properly. Now we're going to take a look at an older child doing the Ling test, and this we're looking at detection. So is there a sound? Okay, do you remember first I had this, okay, and you said okay. So if you hear put the bear to sleep, okay? Do you understand? Okay, wait for me, okay? So listen, okay? You can do this, yeah. E, sh, sh. Good. Yeah, that's right. Ooh. Mm. Ah. So this is a very compliant young lady. She's participating well. She has some understanding of the task, and she's certainly giving a good effort. She did not convince me that she was detecting all the 6 sounds. I don't know what you thought, but uh, she certainly wasn't confident in her responses all the time, and I don't believe she had good detection across the whole spectrum of speech. Now, lest you think I only show you videos where everything is going well, I'm going to share this one with you of my friend Dina, and she is learning the task, and we're hoping to get a good conditioned response so that we can get faster and more accurate programming so that she can get on with running the world. A little bit first. Okay, listen to Mama. Listen. Nope, listen.
You gotta listen, Dina. You gotta listen.
Listen to Mama.
Dina.
Yeah, good. Put it on. There. Yeah, put it on. Uh-oh.
No.
Listen.
Dina.
Listen.
Dina, listen. Listen. Yes. Hey, let me do it.
Oh.
Dina.
Mommy.
No, Dina. No, Dina.
Okay. Mommy, you tell me a sound.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Yay, Ellen.
Listen, Dina. Listen. It's a new one.
E.
Yay. Hey, listen. Oh, did you hear? Put it on. Yay. Listen. Yay. Listen.
E. That's a E. E.
Your turn. Dina can say E.
E. I'll do it. E. Yay!
So we work on this task at the beginning of each therapy session. We try to do it relatively quickly and get the practice in. I do, in watching this clip, in hindsight, wonder if the reason that Dina reacted to shh with no was because she perceived that as meaningful language rather than part of the Ling test. I don't know, but it's certainly a thought. And we're just helping her stay cognizant of the idea of doing a conditioned response. Now let's look at integrating auditory skills into speech with speech babble for a younger listener. This is something that you don't often need for a really young child because they will come to it on their own. So if you have a child that's implanted around the age of 12 months or certainly younger, you may not need to work through this part of the chart. But certainly if you have an older child that is a young listener, it can be really critical to work through this phoneme level of practice. And we typically refer to this as speech babble. And you will see there's in your handouts, our references, there is Catherine Wilson's hierarchy for speech babble that you can take a look at and potentially use. We're really looking to facilitate the development of motor planning needed for speech, and we're coming at it from an acoustic standpoint. So we're working from the most contrastive to the least contrastive sounds. This differs than articulation therapy, and we really want to have this underpinning first before we look at working on articulation in a traditional speech therapy sense. You see in this next slide just a different way to look at the hierarchy in this chart that Dave Sindri made, recognizing that it starts with the suprasegmentals of duration, intensity, and pitch. Is the child using these things in their voice? And it progresses to final consonant sounds that differ in the place of articulation. And these are the things that are hard for, that people often misunderstand in day-to-day life because they're very close. So was it the word pack or was the word pat? Looking at this phoneme level, this is how we help a child who is not gotten good access to sound really, really early, but is early enough to get a natural sounding voice. If a child gets stuck in a certain step along the progression, this may be reason to talk to the audiologist. And after you've gone through the speech acoustic module, which is coming up, you'll have a better sense for how this is true. The other thing to be really aware of is that all our children with hearing loss need to work on vowels. Vowels are not visual. You can't see them on the mouth well. And they're a part of speech that children with typical hearing almost never need to work on. Whereas children who have hearing loss almost always need to work on. Let's look at how we can integrate these auditory skills into literacy. This speech babble becomes the foundation for recognizing long A versus short A, and recognizing sounds are different at that very discrete phoneme level. It tunes the child's ear into listening for these differences and sets the stage for becoming a good reader. The auditory feedback loop is the self-monitoring piece of speech, where you hear it, you say it, you hear it, you say it. It's the ability to change a speech production to match a model based on the information one gets from hearing oneself speak. We all know that we sometimes catch ourselves misspeaking and we go back and correct it because we're monitoring our own speech. And this is what it takes to have good, clear, natural, intelligible speech. If you've ever worked with a child who suffers a progressive hearing loss, in the time between the initial diagnosis and getting to a cochlear implant, say, you can often hear the speech quality deteriorate from where it was to a less ideal place as the individual loses their ability to self-monitor. So looking at the auditory feedback loop in normal development, babies play with sound. So here's an example. So this little guy has typical hearing and he's all about playing with his voice. And this is what we all need to do if we're going to have good sounding speech. He varies his pitch, he varies his volume, he varies the sounds that he makes and the rate of speech, all of the things that go into good, clear, intelligible speech. Now we'll take a look at one of my friends who has cochlear implants when he was at a stage of playing with sound.
Miles.
So he's there just playing with speech, playing with the sound, and at the right age, children really enjoy this. And they develop their phonemic repertoire, or the sounds that they're able to produce and discriminate and adjust in their play with sound. So, do you always need speech babble? This is a question that has come up as we've seen children get access to sound earlier and as technology has improved more and more. And I think this is a question worth asking yourself. Certainly, there are children who need the whole full column of speech babble, and there are children who don't need it worked on directly. And typically, what determines it is the age at which they achieved good access to sound and good device use. So we're going to look at a video of one of my little friends who was 6 months post activation. And we have not worked on speech babble directly. And I want you to just listen to his vocalizations.
Hit the kitty. What does the
So there's certainly a variety of sounds there, and there's different durations. This child does vary his volume and does also vary his pitch. So I haven't seen the need at this point to go through the structured hierarchy of speech babble with him. Now let's look at integrating auditory skills into language. So where we're really looking for meaning, where we're starting out identifying songs or rhymes and participating with hand movements for the wheels on the bus or something like that, and moving into answering general WH questions and progressing from there to having conversation and moving from a known context, which is where we all start, to an unknown context. If you've ever studied a foreign language, you can really relate to this. When you are early in your study of another language, you need abundant contextual support in order to follow a conversation and get the full meaning. If you become fluent in that language, that need goes away. So this column progresses us through what does it take to be a good conversationalist. And this is on the pictures on the screen are one of Dave Sindry's stories that don't have any words, but young children have no trouble understanding what's going on. And it's very easy to have a conversation about this story with a young child. And their parents, too, understand quickly what's going on, and it's something that's easy to talk about. Now, we always want in auditory verbal therapy to pull things into literacy and to bring meaning and sound and words towards creating a good reader. So I'm going to have you watch this clip of Barrick and his dad. And I have just an arrow there to the post-it note because this is a tip I picked up from Teresa Caraway about putting post-it notes in books to cue parents into some things they might want to target. One of the things that we were targeting in the reading of this Dear Santa book was, what is it?
Too small though. I'll send something else.
Ho, ho, ho. Dear Santa. Ho, ho, ho.
What's it mean?
It's a car. You opened it. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to work on this.
Yeah.
So we wrapped up a. What is it? What is it?
What is it?
Open it.
Open it.
You want to see? A kite.
A kite.
So we had the opportunity to work on that question and answer of what is it, and model that for Barrick. The book also provided us a chance to work on and reinforce early learning to listen sounds. And nobody can tell me that babies, young children don't enjoy books because they absolutely do if they're presented in the right way. Now we're moving to the sentence level column, and we're really looking in this column at strengthening and developing the auditory memory of a child so that they're ultimately able to remember the oral directions presented to them in an academic setting or information that their boss tells them about what they need to do. We're going to look here at a clip of Parker where we are working somewhere between this 2 and 3 critical elements. So we're looking for him to remember key pieces of information so that he can act on the direction. Color house or that patterned house.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're starting out with put the dog in, say, a striped house, then that's striped is what we're locked in on.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do put the dog in an orange striped house, that's 2. And we're looking for 2 at this point,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And we're really, what I'm wanting to do is remind him about stripes and dots,
Right.
okay?
I'm not sure if, we'll see if he's got it. I don't need to
Parker,
show
do you
him.
know, let's see, what are those? Purple dots.
Dots.
What are these?
Dots.
Pink dots, yeah, what are those?
Green.
Green dots.
Green.
What are these?
Green dots.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Oh, what are those? Stripes.
Stripes.
Yeah, look, you have stripes. Yeah.
I don't have stripes.
I don't have stripes. Parker, my shirt is solid green. Mommy's shirt is solid blue. Yours is striped. It's always good to bring the topic into the child's relevant. Let's see. We need to find a home for a couple dogs. Let's see. And you can actually make it up as you go. So, whatever you want to do. Okay, you ready? This doggie's name is Daisy. Do you think Daisy's a boy or a girl? I think so too. So she needs a house. We're just going to highlight that he and she thing here. Find out. Mommy's going to tell you which house is hers. Wait, listen.
That one.
Listen.
Mommy's.
Yeah, I see.
But, oh, wait,
Yeah,
no
she
peeking. No peeking.
I'm going to switch it.
Okay. Listen. No, this is going to be different. Listen.
Put the dog in a pink house.
Oh.
What did you hear?
Parker.
Wait, what did you hear? Put the dog in a...
House.
Oh, okay. Mommy, will you say it again?
Put the dog in a pink house.
Oh, yeah. You put the dog in a pink house. Oh, is this a boy dog or a girl dog?
Boy dog.
I think you're right. He needs a house. Mommy, which one is his house?
Put him in a house with dots.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. He likes that house. Do you think this one's a boy or a girl?
Boy.
Oh, he needs a house. Let's see which one is his house.
Put him in an orange house.
Oh.
So here we're working on auditory memory, listening, where we're able to also reinforce language concepts of pronouns for male and female. And you saw there at one point, I asked Parker, what did you hear? We always want to work to strengthen this auditory system and not make a child dependent on multiple repetitions. Any child, any person can get dependent on multiple repetitions if that's always offered to them. We want to make sure that we're encouraging a child to listen and focus the first time and not depend on repetition. But that's a real easy trap for parents or therapists to fall into. So we want to be cognizant of not repeating things multiple times. We're integrating this auditory memory work with language, as I said, and cognition. We're working on these memory skills, and we're working on color, size, quantity, shape, location. We can work on conditional sentences, if X, then Y. And we're working a child from an organized, smaller set to a disorganized set. And in this way, you're able to see progression and to see the improvement that the child has over time as their auditory memory becomes stronger. This is a game that I really like for older children. It's called Mental Blocks, and it has one person giving the directions to make a whatever configuration with these items in the box. And so one person is giving the oral directions and the other is following it to see if they can make the pattern that matches what is on the card. This is a really great language activity for the kids, older kids that you may work with, both to be on the receiving end and on the sending end of the information. Now we're going to look at a closed, disorganized set that Parker's working with. Has 8 items. We're working on this vocabulary of solid and stripes and dots and cross. And we're adding some more linguistic complexity to the message by throwing in with.
Parker, give out a solid blue ball.
Mommy, what did you say?
Solid blue ball. Is that solid?
I think it has dots.
Dots.
Oh, do you see another one?
Solid blue.
Solid blue.
Where is a solid blue ball? Oh, Mommy, show us yours. Oh, good. Okay, so we got that.
So there was vocabulary that Parker wasn't really comfortable with. He'd had some introduction to it, but he still wasn't clear on what the word solid meant. Music is a wonderful way to improve understanding and to develop the auditory system. And I love this quote that music is a pleasurable boot camp for auditory processing. What a great way to think about this, and really very true. The auditory system's recognition of temporal resolution occurs early in development. And by the age of 3 months, infants with typical hearing show adult-like temporal resolution skills. So we want to take advantage of music as we're working with these auditory systems that are weaker and have been deprived. We want to use this pleasurable boot camp to improve and strengthen the system. You can find ages and stages of auditory processing in the Estabrooks book that was recommended as go along with this course. And it talks about integrating music. Baby Blowing Bubbles is a song that is written by a speech language pathologist. I believe her company is Rocket Talk It. And if you haven't heard the song, once you do, it doesn't take very long for this to stay with you and get in your head. You can find this video on YouTube that you see on the right side of the screen. And I had used this with Varric and his father a few sessions, and you'll see that he has taken away pieces of this and that it has become meaningful language to him. So let's take a look.
Bubbles? Pop. Do they pop? Yeah, they do. Do you want bubbles?
You want bubbles?
Bubble, bubble, yay! Baby blowing bubbles, bubbles, bubbles. Uh-oh, that one's not blowing bubbles. Pop, pop, pop! Did they pop?
Right here.
Yay! Yeah.
Up,
Up, up. Down.
up,
Up.
up,
Down.
up,
Up, up. Down. Up, up.
So Barry's
Down.
father had started lifting him up for the up, up, up refrain of the song. And you see,
up.
through that came understanding and use of the word up. I will tell you that whenever I'm working with a child under the age of about 2.5, I turn off my monitor and play the music, but don't play the video, just feeling like it's important for children to really focus on listening. And children today get so much time with screens anyway. Now let's look at the steps in the sentence level that have to do with completing a known linguistic message. So this is my friend Miles and his sister, and you will hear him finish what she says.
Old MacDonald had a farm. Yeah.
So clearly, he recognized Old MacDonald had a farm and he knows what comes next. That song is in his auditory memory. You'll find information about integrating audition into play in the ages and stages of play that you can also find in Estabrook's book. Let's look at this video, which has some development of play pieces in it. A little bit older child, you'll see that the child negotiates roles, that he's involved in pretend play, and that he's able to use different character voices as he plays.
I'm gonna be hungry. I'm gonna eat you.
I'm hungry. Oh, are you going to fight with me? I'm not going to give you this food.
I want to eat the wood fish. This is the story of the daddy crocodile and the mommy crocodile, the good crocodiles.
Okay, they're good crocodiles. Or
I'm hungry.
Oh.
I want to eat fish. So good croc, you need to stay. He's swimming. I cut. I want to eat. So I'm gonna steal your food.
But he's supposed to be a good crocodile.
So you can see that this child has moved along through the development of play nicely, and he is engaging in a lot of fantasy play. Looking at the last column of the auditory learning guide, recognize that this at a word level goes from the most contrastive to the least contrastive. So contrasting ah versus ba ba ba. And moving to things like was the word card or cart. So we always want to set the stage for success, and we want to move the child through a progression as quickly as possible, but we want to find the point at which they're successful and push them just that little bit farther each time. Here we're looking at Barrick again at his first therapy session after activation, where we introduced learning to listen sounds.
Oh.
This one?
That's the camera.
Ah. Yeah.
So never forget to celebrate the successes so that you're reinforcing positive, good actions and getting more of what you want. It takes a lot of input before we get output, um, but we get there and we want to celebrate when we do. Principle 10 of auditory verbal practice is to promote education in regular schools with peers who have typical hearing and with appropriate services from early childhood onwards. And this starts with the idea that a child with a hearing loss can be integrated fully into a typical preschool setting with accommodations or supports like a FM system or a Roger system to help deal with distance and noise and preferential seating and maybe some additional school-based services on the side. But children who are successful in their listening and spoken language journey should be able to integrate into general education. I'm going to show you a clip in a minute of a child who is school age. He was integrated into the mainstream very early on, well before this video clip, but it's a good one to see. And just as a reminder, you can find the principles of auditory verbal therapy at the A.G. Bell Academy website should you need to review them.
Educate them about how to best work with the device and work with the children to make them learn to listen and talk the best they possibly can.
And now Reese is in his general education placement, functioning with other children his age, doing activities that other kids his age are doing, just being a typical young boy.
So I'll leave you with that thought of a typical young boy, not a young boy with a hearing loss, but just a typical young boy. And I look forward to talking with you at our live web class where we'll look at putting all of this together. Thanks so much for your time.